Hello, I just watched a very interesting talk by this professor slash author slash blogger called Cory Doctorow? What's his name? Give me a sec. I have my notebook here somewhere. I took all these notes with these like really goofy, oh my gosh, drawings. Okay, this is embarrassing. With all these goofy drawings, because I've been noticing that's kind of the note style I've been liking recently for my classes as well, where, they go on, and I just, I write, but I also make goofy little drawings. Anyway, yes, Cory Doctorow. His talk is about enshittification. Enshittification is a term he invented back in 2022, around 3 years ago. That's weird to say. That's all about this idea of why the internet is getting more and more shitty. So the main concept is around the internet used to be good, now it's not. What happened there? And his argument is corporate greed. His argument is so many of these platforms, which again, a platform is where there's a side A and a side B, and the two benefit one another, like Amazon, sellers, buyers, like Uber, drivers, riders. What companies have been doing, or platform companies have been doing, is at first making a great value that attracts users. Then slowly chipping away at that value to benefit businesses that are involved in it. In the example of Uber, this doesn't really work. Maybe I am not explaining this that well, but let's say for the example of Amazon, like, nope, let me use Facebook. Like, Facebook, for example, was then reaching out to business marketers, right? Like people that want to publish ads, being like, hey, there's this targeted advertising that we can put on these users to benefit your business. Only then the next level after that is it turns out they're also scamming the businesses. This is more relevant for Amazon, Uber, all these people on the other end that are then paying upwards and upwards of X amount % of their profits just to try to stay like on the top page of like the SEO search engine when you search up something on Amazon, for example. It's intense stuff. It's stuff that also is not very surprising. Like when you hear it, you're like, fuck, like, okay, duh, this is why this is the huge thing it is, right? Which also gives us consumers benefits in one way or another, right? Like the convenience of the free shipping, the 2-day shipping that we love, or the convenience of, I don't know, not having to pay for Instagram. That was another interesting quote that he had. He was saying, this notion of if you're not paying for the product, you're the product. He was like, no, like, fuck that. It's not that there's one party that's benefiting off of this and another party that's not. Everybody is getting fucked in the process. So that was pretty interesting. So let's go through a couple of things he mentioned. So, enshittification of the internet, yada yada yada. The idea of companies, for example, like Uber, being funded by investment capital, like apparently Saudi money, that made them lose profit for 13 years until they finally rid the cab industry dead to some extent, right? This was a similar case with Amazon and this company called diapers.com. Basically, Amazon tried to acquire diapers.com to capture that share of the market. Diapers.com was like, nope. And so what Amazon did, which there's a term for it, but I lost it somewhere in there while taking notes, is they sold 200 millions worth of diapers at a loss consistently right? Yeah, consistently, until diapers.com went bankrupt. The investors of that company were just, the value of it was like little to nothing, and Amazon bought it. And so you're kind of like, why did they spend like $200 million for just like a diaper company? Well, the notion was more than just a diaper company. This was about showing that Amazon could buy and neutralize absolutely anyone on their terms. And so this was kind of a similar notion to when Mark Zuckerberg bought Instagram. Kind of saying, when people leave Facebook, they go to Instagram. Now that he owns it, even if they make the switch, they're still his customers. They're still under his control. Which is a little, making me feel better about not being on Instagram. But then that was another thing that Dr. Doctorow mentioned. Just being off of Twitter, just being off of these platforms doesn't necessarily make the change you think it is. And that's where I think I was a little bit resistant to the idea. Maybe just because I'm a little more hopeful about personal changes than I am about policy changes, but maybe that's a change I need to make. Another interesting thing he mentioned in regards to policies was this 1998 bill law that bans circumventing. So to circumvent something is to basically manipulate the way the device is used to your own liking. So let's say I have this where's my phone? I have this phone, right? I have this Apple phone. So right now, the way this Apple phone is controlled is through Apple, meaning I can only use iOS app stores, right? Like that type of UI, all of that. But at the end of the day, this makes us forget that this, at the end of the day, is like materials, right? And so we have the advanced technology to be able to change the nature of this system, right? Only this circumventing law makes it so there's something called the bypass digital lock of a device. So what this means is that if you were to try to somehow bypass the digital lock on Apple's iPhones and download your own apps or your own app store, you could be potentially charged with a felony for doing that. It's interesting, I recently saw a YouTube video recommended by one of my classmates about this company called Flock. What Flock does is they're a startup that's being licensed by more and more police forces and commercialized spaces and companies to monitor you, like with security cameras, right? Only what's special about their security cameras is the level to which they can surveil and keep track of the data of that surveillance. So I'm not making much sense, but let's just say, for example, they have a Flock company in front of a street called Broadway, like a Broadway Boulevard, whatever. Every car that passes on that Broadway Boulevard and every car's license plate is then put into Flock's database. Once it's registered, it is already like tracking and keeping track of where that same license plate has been, hasn't been, like the location of it. It's basically identical to then having had just like a GPS on that car because of how many of these there are. In fact, someone in the talk spoke right before it began saying that there are already 7 Flock cameras on Cornell's campus. Yeah, confirmed, which is kind of crazy. But my point is, back to circumventing, is that in this YouTube video, the guy circumvented the Flock camera, or he created his own kind of mimicking it, as to not try to get charged with the felony charge that makes this illegal, to then be able to see how he could stop that type of technology, like how you could put some sort of invisible thing on your like license plate to trick the kind of computer vision that these flock cameras use. Computer vision meaning like that it can detect like, oh, this is a license plate, and oh, I'm using this visual, and I all of a sudden have the ability to see and recognize like humans do. So, long rant. I gotta go soon, but we'll keep this going for maybe like 5 more minutes at most. So stay in touch here. What else did we talk about? It was interesting hearing him talk about tech employees. So like people who are actually working for these evil companies, right? So he was asking, like, why didn't tech company employees unionize? Unionizing meaning, you know, how teachers have a union, how like firefighters have a union, like how there are these unions set up in the labor law history of this country that I don't know too much about, honestly, that make it so people can come together and demand X amount of benefits, fair wages, that kind of thing. And so what he was saying was that people that worked in tech did not need to unionize because, one, there was a scarcity of them. Like, this was a specialized skill, and they were enjoying like the luxuries of that scarcity, whether it's like Google having private chefs. Apparently there's some of these companies have like a personal massageist coming in. I don't know how true that is or not. He just said that. And another thing was, you know, it's not like these companies were driving these workers through mission either, right? Because if you were making it so they were mission driven, it would then make it that much harder when you, as the company, wanted to then enshittify your product. So if you're like Google and you're like, we want to be the best search engine in the world to motivate your workers to stick with your company, right? Then it's going to be kind of confusing when, and this is a real case, when an idea gets brought up to make search engine searches more difficult, aka worse, so that a user stays longer on Google and performs more search engines to get the question they asked answered. I mean, it made a lot of sense, but it was like, oh my god, I was just like, you know? And there's a guy called Ben Gons that was very much against this and kind of revealed some of this that I need to look more into. But the point is, or I guess my connection here is, in my ethics and AI class, we've been talking a lot about, is computing someone that can, you know, code, create digital spaces, create all these things digitally, a profession? And so we talked about like, what is a profession versus like an amateur? You know, like you're not going to call a waiter at a restaurant a professional, right? But you are going to call someone like a doctor or a lawyer a professional. And part of that is because what you're doing is this person is required to have some sort of specialization of extra training, extra schooling before becoming and on taking that role, right? And on top of that, a profession usually requires you to have some sort of responsibility, some sort of greater good that you uphold for society, because you're a core part of society, right? And you impact society. And so that's very much built into it. And so what's really starting to click for me is, you know, computing is having some of these, let's just say, very weighty, okay, like very heavy embedments, okay, like intertwinements into our society in the same way lawyers' decision might or doctors' decision might, right? But at the same time, when X decision goes wrong, there is no institution behind those computing professionals to either condemn them or stop them. So let's say a doctor does something like that gymnastics doctor who did that thing to like the whole USA Gymnastics, like even putting aside how hard it was to dismantle him, right, and take away his license, there was a system to do that. There was a person to turn to. Here, if someone creates a computing technology that inherently creates I can't even think of anything evil like without thinking about the girls' examples again. Like somehow makes it so little girls are targeted in a different way, maybe digitally. How are we gonna ever condemn that as wrong? There's nothing behind it. So that union thing versus that institution thing, it kind of comes together as there's no one shared agreement. And so we've read some like code of ethics of computing professionals by this one organization, but like if I didn't know about that organization, if my friends didn't know about that organization, like it's hard. There's this very big like push and pull here between we hate monopolies, we hate big things, but also like there's a lack of something bigger regulating all of this. And that also goes for a lot of like these privacy laws that he's saying haven't been updated since 1988. Last of which was a privacy law that had to do with VHS tapes. I need to look into that. But anyway, last but not least, I really should go, but last but not least, he talked about this idea of dictators, or, he said Margaret Thatcher, her big thing was like, there is no alternative, right? And he's trying to say with now tech companies and AI, they're trying to say or make you feel like there is no alternative other than AI being incorporated into every aspect of our lives and that being an inevitable thing. And so it's almost like, think about a phone, a device without an app store. The way we live right now, or the way we're made to feel, is that would be impossible. In the same way, there is kind of that tension between I'm on Instagram, I'm on Reels, I'm scrolling all the time, I hate it, and that razor thin, he calls it a razor thin line to I hate Instagram, I hate scrolling, so I'm leaving. Here you're stuck, here you're not. Here you actually choose to leave. And from what he said, and this really interests me to know what really makes you cross over that razor thin line. But from what he said, it's whenever anything big with like a really big stain happens. So when that whole, I'm forgetting the name of it, but like the first time Facebook was put on trial by Congress for that political campaign targeted ads thingy, right? That made like a huge drop of users. Then the same thing for, he named another example, but it seems like when everybody's hating together, everybody dips together. So my question is about small businesses and e-commerce platforms. That was one of the questions I had, or I still have remaining. And another question is, how do you as a student, or maybe even person in the world, stay on top of shit without being on the shit that everybody's still on? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, thank you for listening. I shall go to Gorsia, and you have a wonderful night.